The life I was so proud of was the thing destroying me. That sentence right there is 54 years of learning compressed into 14 words. And I know how it sounds. It sounds like something a bitter old man says when he's looking for sympathy. But I'm not bitter, I'm clear. There's a difference. Bitter means you're still fighting the truth. Clear means you finally stopped. My name is Russell. I'm 79 years old. I was a regional operations manager for a commercial supply company for 31 years. I had a corner office by the end. I had plaques on the wall. I had people who reported to me, who reported to people who reported to other people. And for the longest stretch of my adult life, I believed, with a kind of certainty that doesn't even feel like belief, because it's just the water you swim in, that the measure of a man was how much he could carry without complaining. I carried everything, and I kept going. But before I tell you what finally broke that open, before I tell you about the man who died with a list in his wallet and a retirement he barely touched, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to say is not advice from someone who figured it out. It's a confession from someone who didn't. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a book you read and a fire you walk through. I grew up in a house where my father left for work before the sun came up and came home after it went down. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't absent in the way people talk about on television. He was just devoted to the idea that providing was the highest form of love. He never said that out loud. He didn't need to. It was in the way he moved, the way he ate his dinner fast because there were still things to fix, the way he'd fall asleep in his chair at 8:30 on a Saturday and my mother would cover him with a blanket and whisper to us, "Let your father rest. He works so hard." That was the gospel. Work hard. Be reliable. Don't ask for anything. Don't need anything. And whatever you want for yourself, whatever quiet dream sits in the back of your mind like a song you can't quite remember the words to, put it away. There are people depending on you. There will be time for that later. So I did. I put it away. I told myself it was fine. I married young. I had children young. I got the job, got the promotion, got the next one. I showed up every single morning. I stayed late every single night. I missed things, recitals, birthdays, my daughter's first school play where she had one line and practiced it for 2 weeks in front of the bathroom mirror. I wasn't there. I was in a conference room reviewing supply chain projections that meant absolutely nothing to anyone who loved me. I missed the ordinary Tuesday nights that I didn't know were the actual fabric of a life. The dinners where nothing important happened, which is exactly what made them important. The evenings where my kids were young enough to want to sit next to me, before they grew into teenagers who'd learned not to bother asking. I told myself I was building something. I told myself the sacrifice had a payoff waiting at the end, like a pension for the soul, and I kept going. You know what the cruelest part was? Nobody told me to stop. Nobody grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Russell, you're missing it." Because everyone around me was doing the same thing. My colleagues, my neighbors, the men I played cards with on the second Saturday of every month. We were all running the same race toward the same mirage, and we validated each other's choices just by being in it together. When everyone you know is living the same lie, it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like life. I want to be honest with you about what that looked like from the inside, because from the outside, it looked like success. People respected me. My wife told her friends I was dependable. My kids knew I would never let them down, at least not financially. But inside, there was this low hum. Not depression, not sadness exactly. More like a signal that something wasn't aligned, like driving a car that pulls slightly to the left. You can still drive it, you just have to grip the wheel a little harder than you should. That was my life for decades. A life that worked, a life that functioned, a life I kept white-knuckling through because I didn't know there was another option. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October, and I remember the weather was too beautiful for what I was about to hear. I was at my desk. It was around 10:15. I had a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and I was reviewing quarterly numbers that I can't remember a single digit of now. My phone buzzed. It was my friend Gerald, Leonard's brother-in-law. He said 4 words. Leonard didn't wake up. I asked him what he meant. He said it again. Leonard didn't wake up. He's gone. I sat there. The office was mostly empty because half the floor was in a meeting I'd skip. Debasidid. There was a woman down the hall, laughing about something, and I could hear the hum of the vending machine near the elevator. The fluorescent light above my desk buzzed the way it always did, that faint electrical whine I'd stopped hearing years ago but suddenly couldn't ignore. And I just sat there with my cold coffee and the quarterly numbers and the sound of that laugh. And I thought, this is what it sounds like when the world doesn't stop for your best friend dying. Everything just keeps going. The vending machine hums, the woman laughs, the numbers sit on the screen waiting to be reviewed, and your best friend is gone, and the world doesn't even flinch. Leonard Mosley was 67 years old. He had been retired for exactly 3 weeks. I need to tell you about Leonard because without Leonard, I would have never understood what I'd done to myself and what you might be doing to yourself right now. I met Leonard when we were both 25. He was a warehouse supervisor at a packaging plant on the east side of town, the kind of place where the loading dock smelled like cardboard and diesel, no matter what time of year it was. Leonard was built like a fire hydrant, short, wide, impossible to knock over. He always had a toothpick between his teeth, not chewing it, just holding it there, like it was part of his face. And he called everyone Captain. Didn't matter if you were the CEO or the kid mopping the break room floor. Morning, Captain. How's it going, Captain? He said it with this little nod, like he was letting you in on something. Leonard and I became friends the way men of our generation did, not by talking about our feelings, but by standing next to each other long enough that silence became comfortable. We'd have lunch on Fridays. He'd eat the same thing every week, ham and cheese on white bread, an apple, a thermos of black coffee. I used to joke that he'd been eating that lunch since the Eisenhower administration. He'd just shrug and say, "When something works, you don't fix it, Captain." That was Leonard's whole philosophy. When something works, you don't fix it. He applied it to everything: his lunch, his job, his marriage, his life. He worked at that plant for 41 years. Same commute, same parking spot, same brown jacket he wore from September to April, even when the zipper stopped working and he just held it closed with his hand. His wife Doris used to tell me that Leonard had a list. She mentioned it at a barbecue once, laughing about it. She said he kept a folded piece of notebook paper in his wallet with places he wanted to go. He'd had it for years. She said he'd take it out sometimes after dinner and look at it, then fold it back up and put it away. She said, I asked him once when we were going to start checking things off, and he said, "When the time is right, Doris. When the time is right." The time was never right. There was always another shift to cover, another bill to plan for, another reason to wait. Leonard talked about retirement the way some people talk about heaven, like it was this beautiful place that existed somewhere in the future, and all you had to do was keep your head down and earn your way there. "When I retire, Captain," he'd tell me, "I'm going to see the Grand Canyon. I'm going to take Doris to the coast. I'm going to learn to fish properly, not this casting off the dock nonsense." He retired on a Friday. There was a small party in the break room. Somebody brought a sheet cake with his name spelled wrong. They wrote Leonard. He laughed about it. He gave a short speech that wasn't really a speech, just Leonard being Leonard. He said, 41 years, and they still can't spell my name. That tells you everything you need to know. Everybody laughed. He took his brown jacket off the hook by the door and walked out. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Heart attack in his sleep. Doris found him in the morning. She said he looked peaceful, like he was just sleeping in late for the first time in 4 decades. She said the only thing out of place was that his wallet had fallen off the nightstand onto the floor. I went to the funeral. It was a Wednesday. The kind of service where everybody says the right things and nobody says the real thing. The pastor talked about God's plan. Leonard's nephew read a poem. Doris sat in the front row in a navy blue dress and didn't cry until they played a song Leonard used to hum while he cooked breakfast, some old tune I couldn't name but recognized immediately. After the service, Doris pulled me aside. She pressed something into my hand. It was the list, the piece of notebook paper from his wallet. She said, "Russell, I want you to have this, because you're the only person who will understand what it means." I unfolded it that night at my kitchen table. The paper was soft from years of folding and unfolding. The pencil was faded in places. There were 11 items on that list: the Grand Canyon, the California coast, a fishing trip in Montana, a train ride through the Canadian Rockies, see the Northern Lights, visit his grandmother's village in Virginia, learn to play the harmonica. Not one of them was crossed off, not a single one. I sat at that table for a long time. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding that list like it was a mirror, because it was. Leonard and I had lived the same life. We'd told ourselves the same story. We'd made the same deal with the future. I'll give you everything now, and you'll give me everything later. And the future broke its promise. Not because it was cruel, because that's not how time works. Time doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't wait. It doesn't negotiate. It just goes. And I kept going right alongside it, head down, hands full, telling myself that someday was a place I'd eventually arrive. Standing in my kitchen at 67 years old, holding a dead man's list of dreams written in pencil, I understood something I'd been running from for my entire adult life. The life I was so proud of, the reliability, the discipline, the never missing a day, the always being the one people could count on, that life had a cost. And the cost was me. And now I need to talk to you, because I see you doing exactly what Leonard and I did. You're not 79. You might be 35 or 42 or 51. You've still got time. And that's exactly the most dangerous thing about where you are. Because time feels abundant when you're in the middle of it. It feels like a resource you can always draw from later. You keep telling yourself you'll take that trip when the kids are older. You'll write that thing you've been thinking about when work settles down. You'll have that conversation with your father when the moment feels right. You'll start living the way you actually want to live when you've earned it, when the mortgage is paid, when the promotion comes through, when things are finally stable. They won't be stable, you know that. You've been waiting for stable your whole life and it hasn't come yet, and it won't, because that's not what life does. Life doesn't settle, it shifts. You're exhausted every night, and you tell yourself that's just how it is, that everyone feels this way, that being this tired is just the price of being a responsible adult. It's not. That's your life trying to tell you something, and you keep turning down the volume because listening would require you to change, and change feels like a luxury you can't afford. You haven't called your mother in how long? 2 weeks? A month? You keep meaning to. You think about it in the car sometimes, or late at night when the house is quiet. But then something else needs your attention, and you tell yourself she understands. She does understand. That's the tragedy. She's gotten so used to waiting for you that she's stopped expecting you, and you're so used to postponing her that you've stopped noticing. One day, that phone will ring and someone will say 4 words the way Gerald said them to me, and you will stand there holding a phone in a world that suddenly has a hole in it that no amount of busyness will ever fill. And I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I'm the guy who waited. I'm the proof of what happens when you take that deal with the future, and the future doesn't hold up its end. I had a list too, not written in pencil, not folded in my wallet. Mine was in my head, and that's almost worse, because you can pretend a list in your head doesn't exist. You can tell yourself you don't really want those things. You can say you're being practical, responsible, realistic, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is you're afraid, and I kept going, and so are you. But here's the part I haven't said yet, the part that took me longer to admit than anything else. The reason I didn't live, the real reason, underneath all the excuses about responsibility and money and timing, was that I was terrified of what would happen if I did, not terrified that it would go wrong, terrified that it would go right. Because if I actually took that trip, actually had that conversation, actually sat still long enough to feel what I was feeling, then I'd have to face the fact that I'd spent decades not doing it, and that grief, The grief of your own wasted time is the one thing most people cannot bear to look at. So we keep busy instead. We fill the hours. We optimize the schedule. We tell ourselves that productivity is the same thing as living, that exhaustion is proof that we matter, that being needed by everyone is the same thing as being known by someone. It's not. I promise you, it's not. Being needed is a role. Being known is a relationship. And most of us spend our whole lives playing the role while the relationship starves. You can be the most important person in a room full of people and still be completely alone. I know because I was. For years, I walked into rooms where people needed me, relied on me, counted on me, and not a single one of them knew what I was afraid of. Not one of them knew what I dreamed about when I let myself dream, which was almost never. I had traded depth for dependability. I had traded being known for being useful, and usefulness has an expiration date. When you retire, when you slow down, when the role you've been playing is no longer needed, what's left? Who's left? If the only version of you that people know is the one who provides, then when you stop providing, you disappear. Not dramatically, quietly, like a lamp that's been unplugged but nobody notices because the sun is still out. I think about Doris sometimes, about the way she used to ask Leonard when they were going to start checking things off that list. She wasn't nagging. She was knocking on the door of the man she married, asking if he was still in there. And Leonard kept saying, "When the time is right." What he meant was, "I'm scared and I don't have the words for it, and it's easier to just go back to work." I did the same thing to my wife, Carol. She asked me once, this was maybe 15 years ago, we were sitting on the back porch on a Sunday evening, and the light was doing that golden thing it does in late summer. She said, "Russell, do you think we're happy? Or do you think we're just used to each other?" I didn't answer. I said something about the lawn needing work. She didn't ask again. That silence cost me something I'll never get back. Not the marriage. Carol and I are still together. But something inside the marriage. A door she stopped knocking on. And the worst part is, I know she stopped knocking because she decided the room was empty. She decided I wasn't in there. And for a long time, she was right. I wasn't. I was at work. I was at the office. I was earning. I was carrying. I was being the man I thought I was supposed to be. And I was nowhere near the man she actually needed. I'll tell you what Carol needed. She needed me to sit down. She needed me to look at her. Really look. The way you look at someone when you're not already calculating what you need to do next. She needed me to answer her question honestly, even if the honest answer was terrifying. Are we happy, or are we just used to each other? The honest answer was, I don't know. And I don't know would have been the bravest thing I could have said because it would have cracked the door open. It would have let her in. Instead, I talked about the lawn, and she heard exactly what I was really saying, which was, I'm not brave enough to have this conversation with you. The deeper truth is this. You're not too busy. You're hiding. Busyness is the most socially acceptable form of cowardice there is. Nobody questions you when you say you're busy. Nobody challenges you. They nod. They say they understand. They admire your work ethic. And you get to keep avoiding the one thing that actually matters, which is sitting in the stillness long enough to ask yourself, is this the life I want, or is this the life I fell into? That question will ruin you. I mean that as a compliment. It will wreck the scaffolding you've built around a life you chose by default. And it will leave you standing in the rubble, looking at what's left. And what's left is the truth. And the truth is always smaller and simpler and more frightening than the story you've been telling yourself. Research suggests that the number one regret people express at the end of their lives is not that they failed at something. It's that they never tried. They never even started. They were so busy building the life they thought they were supposed to have that they never built the life they actually wanted. Studies on end-of-life reflection have found the same thing over and over. People don't regret the things they did. They regret the things they didn't do, the conversations they didn't have, the risks they didn't take. the love they didn't express because they assumed there would be more time. There is always less time than you think. Always. So here is what I'm asking you to do. Not because I read it somewhere, but because I learned every one of these the way you learn not to touch a hot stove. Stop telling yourself you'll do it later. Later is where dreams go to die, and they die quietly enough that you won't even notice until it's too late. Stop performing your life for an audience that isn't watching. Nobody is keeping score. The people you're trying to impress are too busy trying to impress someone else. Stop mistaking exhaustion for meaning. Being tired every night is not evidence that you're living well. It's evidence that something is wrong. Stop waiting for permission to want what you want. You don't need anyone to tell you it's okay to change your mind about how you're living. Stop saying, "I'm fine," when someone you love asks you how you are. That phrase has buried more marriages, more friendships, and more honest moments than any lie ever told with malicious intent. Start making the phone call you've been putting off. Not tomorrow, today. The person on the other end of that call is not going to be there forever, and neither are you. Start saying the honest thing in the rooms where you've been performing the polite thing. The people who matter will stay. The ones who leave were never yours to keep. Start treating your own joy as something that matters, not as a reward you earn after everything else is done, but as a responsibility you owe to the people who love you. Because the version of you that is rested, present, and alive is the version they actually need. Not the one who provides, the one who shows up. I'm 79 years old. I can feel the edges of my time now in a way I couldn't at 50 or even 65. It's not morbid, it's just honest. I wake up slower, I get tired earlier. My knees have opinions about stairs that they didn't used to have. There are mornings where I sit on the edge of the bed for a minute before standing, not because I'm in pain, but because I'm aware that this body, this mind, this window of being alive and conscious and able to feel the weight of a hand in mine, it's closing. Slowly, but it's closing. And that awareness, the awareness that used to terrify me, is now the most honest thing I own. Something shifted in me after Leonard died. Something cracked open that I'd kept sealed shut for decades. I started asking myself the questions I'd been avoiding. Not the big philosophical ones. The small specific ones. Do I actually want to go to this meeting? Or am I going because I've always gone? Do I want to spend this Saturday the way I always spend it? Or is there something else? Am I doing this because I choose to? Or because I forgot I had a choice? I called my son yesterday for no reason. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important. His daughter's soccer team, a book he's been reading, the way the weather's been strange this year. He laughed at something I said, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd made him laugh. That call never would have happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I would have told myself I didn't have time, that there was something more productive I should be doing, that we'd catch up later. I took Carol to the coast last spring. We sat on a bench overlooking the water and didn't say much. She put her hand on mine. I let it stay there. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about what needed to be done when we got home. I just sat there with her, watching the waves, feeling the wind, being the man she'd been waiting for. And I kept going, but this time, toward the things that mattered. I still have Leonard's list. It's in the top drawer of my desk. I look at it sometimes. Not to be sad, to remember. To remember that the future is not a savings account. You cannot deposit your life into it and expect to withdraw it later with interest. The only moment you have is this one. The only time you can act is now. The only person you can be honest with today is the one sitting in front of you, or the one looking back at you in the mirror. Before I go, I want to ask you one thing, and I want you to answer it honestly, even if it's only to yourself. What is on your list? Not the one you'd show someone, the real one. The one you've been carrying around in your head or folded up inside your chest. The one with the things you've been postponing because the time wasn't right. What's on it? And what are you waiting for? Or if this meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for me, for them. Because someone in your life right now is living the way Leonard lived. and they don't have anyone telling them what I wish someone had told him. If you're new here, subscribe. Not because I need the numbers, but because I'm not done talking, and I don't think you're done listening. The life I was so proud of was the thing destroying me. I know that now. The question is, will you wait 54 years to know it too?